Fantastic. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Beth. These guys do a fantastic job, don't they? And, both Beth and Sana were saying beforehand that they're a little bit croaky at the moment, but they do so well serving us, don't they? And really appreciate you guys. It's great. I want to start by asking you a question, as I often do. Those of you who are here regularly will know that's often the case. And whether you're kind of here or you're joining us online, why don't you just put your hand up for a moment if you can relate to this, if this would be you. But how many of you as a child were afraid of the dark? How many of you think, I'm not a child anymore, but I'm still not particularly keen on the dark? A few of you. Well done. I always remember when I was, I think I was about 11. Ages get fuzzy, don't they, in the past? But I think I was about 11, and I went potholing with a group from school. And if you've ever done kind of potholing or caving, you'll know that you end up kind of having to wear these helmets with lights on the front, and everyone's got one so you can kind of see where you're going as you're kind of crawling through the caves and the different things. You can't be holding one and manage. And on this kind of time, we kind of came through a narrow tunnel where we'd had to be kind of crouched down and get through the tunnel. And then we came out into this big cavern. And the guide that we were with that then asked us, he said, I want you now to, all of you, turn off your lights. And in that moment, we were kind of plunged into pitch blackness. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face, and it wasn't one of those moments where you kind of say, well, just wait a few moments and your eyes will adjust, because for that to work, there's got to be some light from somewhere for your lights to kind of adjust to, and there was just nothing. And as the moments kind of tick by and it's dark, it's a strange experience. You're nervous to take a step in any direction because you don't know what or who is there. The darkness is a place of the unknown. It has a way of kind of exaggerating threat and fear that's just not rational. That's why scary movies, they're never set on a bright summer's day, are they? They're always set in the dark. And then after a few moments, the guide said, okay, you can turn your lights back on now. And in an instant, everything changed. You could see what was around you, and you could visibly sense the tension dissipate as people kind of relaxed again. Light makes all the difference. And we see it in so many different ways. It's why I'm amazed at this. Light even has this kind of physical kind of benefit to us. It's why people tend to be a lot happier in the sunshine. In a morning like today, people come in with a smile on their face, and life is good. It's good for us physically. It's good for our mental health. It's, we associate light with feelings of hope and joy, and it's a positive thing. Whereas one of the ways that we talk about something like depression or a really painful season in life, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression of going through the dark night of the soul. And these associations with light and with darkness are something that just comes naturally. It's not something we kind of have to figure out. It just kind of happens naturally. And it's actually something of the way that God designed things to be. All throughout the Bible, you can see light contrasted with darkness. Right at the start, if you open up to the beginning in Genesis 1, we read how in the beginning the world was dark and empty and formless. And then God said what? He said, let there be light. He separated the darkness from the light, the day from the night. And then all through the Bible, God is called our light. He's called the light. And our spiritual enemy, Satan, he's called the prince of darkness. In Acts 26, Paul is talking about the good news of Jesus that he's kind of been commissioned to share with people. And he says it so that their eyes would be opened and they may turn from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God. That what it is to live for God is to live in the light. And right now, we're taking time to explore something of who Jesus is, not through just what other people say about him, because people have all sorts of different opinions and things, but through what Jesus says about himself. And one of the things that he says, one of the life-changing statements that he makes is in John 8, verse 12, when he says this, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And because of our natural reaction, just the way that we're wired, the way we kind of automatically feel, that reaction to darkness and to light, there is something about Jesus' statement that's attractive, isn't there? It's filled with hope. We see darkness in the world around us. We've experienced it in our own lives in different ways, and we don't want to be in darkness. We don't like that idea. We want to live in the light of life. I know I do. And yet at the same time as being attractive, there's something that can seem a little bit vague. It's great imagery, and yeah, I get this great sense of, yes, but what does it really mean? What does it look like? How does it impact on our lives today? And for who Jesus is as the light of the world, to become something more than just a nice idea or this concept that we find attractive, we need to understand something of the context in which Jesus said it. What was going on at that moment. And so we're going to look at the big picture context, and then we're going to look at the personal context. The kind of big picture truth of the statement, and then the personal difference that Jesus being the light of the world really means for you and for me. So let's start with a big picture context. Well, when Jesus makes this statement, he's at the temple in Jerusalem, and it's the middle of one of the biggest Jewish festivals. It's the Feast of Tabernacles. It was a festival that happened about, not quite now, but around about this time of year that we're in right now, about harvest time. And it was to celebrate God's provision for his people every day as they kind of brought the harvest in and all of that kind of stuff. But even more than that, the festival was to remember and to celebrate God's provision in the past. How he'd led the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt and into the promised land. They would all, it's called the Feast of Tabernacles, or sometimes you see it's called the Feast of Booths, but basically it's called that because they would all sleep in these little tents to remember the way that they lived when they crossed through the wilderness on their way out of slavery and into freedom in the promised land. And then at the end of the festival, they would light these 4 massive candles in the temple courts that would shine out from the temple for miles around. People could see it from everywhere. And the people would stay up all night under the light of these candles, dancing and celebrating who God was, as they remembered how God had led his people as a pillar of fire through the night. This light shone to remind them of how God's presence and God's power was with his people, leading them from slavery into freedom. And it was at the end of this night of celebration, at the dawn of the next day, with this imagery in everyone's minds, that Jesus stands up and says, "I am the light of the world." As you once followed the pillar of fire, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And this was radical. This was shocking. It was mind-blowing for the people who heard it, because Jesus was saying, "I am the presence of God. I am the power of God. I am God with you today. And I am here to lead you from slavery into freedom, from darkness into light." I am your hope, and I am your provider. And today Jesus is saying the same thing to you. Wherever you are at, however you might be feeling, whatever your past experience, Jesus is reaching out to you. He's reaching out to you and saying, I am the light of the world. I am the presence and the power of God with you today. Follow me. Because as you follow me, you will never walk in darkness. I will lead you out of the dark night of the soul. I will lift the weights of the fears and the worries and the grief from your shoulders. I will set you free from slavery to sin and addictions. I will show you where to go that you may have the light of life, that you may have and know life to the full. Isn't Jesus amazing? This big picture context helps us to understand something more of who Jesus is. What it is that he's saying, that it isn't just this kind of airy-fairy, nice-sounding concept, but there's something real and solid that he's trying to say to us about who he is, what it is that he wants to do in our lives. And my heart kind of leaps at that and says, yes, Jesus, I want to follow you. Maybe you feel the same as you kind of hear who Jesus is as the light of the world. At the same time, though, when we only have the big picture context, it's still a bit abstract, isn't it? It sounds great, but what does that really look like in my life? What does it really mean for my reality? And I think this is why understanding the personal context is so important. And this is the part which is often so easily missed, I think, in what's going on when Jesus makes this statement. You see, when Jesus makes this statement, there is an encounter in the temple courts between Jesus as the light of the world and a woman in one of the darkest moments of her entire life. This is what we read just before Jesus makes this statement in John 8, verse 2. It says, at dawn, Jesus appeared again in the temple courts. So at the end of this night where there's been this great celebration, this light that is shining at dawn, he appears in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery." Now let's just pause for a moment and think about what's going on here. And it isn't pleasant. It's somehow, one or two of the religious leaders, these self-righteous, legalistic men, have caught a married guy and a woman going at it. And we don't know exactly what happened, but it seems like they kind of drag the woman out. I don't know what chance she was getting. I don't know if she was naked. I don't know if she had a chance to grab a bed sheet. I don't know what was going on, but they drag her out in public and humiliate her beyond description. They make her stand before not just Jesus, but this group of people in the temple courts. Without any shadow of a doubt, this is the darkest, most shame-filled, humiliating moment for her. And then the religious leaders say to Jesus in verse 5, "In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women, to put them to death. Now, what do you say?" And we read they were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. You see, what they were saying was true. The law of Moses said if you were caught in adultery, you had to be put to death. And so they were trying to trap Jesus, because if he agreed with them, and he said, go ahead, stone her. That's what the law says you got to do. then his reputation for being loving would have been destroyed and he would have lost his favor with the people. But if he said, no, don't stone her, let her off for what she's done, then his reputation as a holy man of God would have been destroyed and he would have lost all of his favor with the people. So they were trying to catch him out, to make him look foolish in front of all of the people at this big festival so that he would lose favor with them. He would lose his following. Now, Jesus is going to do something really significant. But before we look at that, I want you to see the first way that the light of the world works in our lives. And it's the aspect of light that can make us feel uncomfortable and want to pull back. And that's that the first thing that light does is that light exposes. Sometimes Rosie and I will sit and watch a film and we want to switch all the lights off to kind of give that cinematic feel. I imagine lots of you have done it and you kind of sit there in the dark and we've got all our snacks around us and it's comfortable, it's great, and we enjoy the film. And then it gets to the end of the film and you flick the lights on and suddenly you see this mess of chocolate wrappers that's kind of scattered around and you've been sat there in the dark, comfortable, content, and then you flick the lights on and you can't possibly sit down again until you've kind of cleaned up because the light exposes the mess that you've been sat in. In the law of Moses, the word of God is his gift to us as the light of the world to expose the mess in our lives. It reveals our guilt and the things that need to be dealt with. You see, as horrible as the way this woman is treated is, she was guilty. She was in the wrong. And in this moment, that sin had been exposed. And this is uncomfortable. Being exposed leaves us feeling vulnerable. This is what Jesus is talking about in John 3, verses 19 to 20, when he says, "This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed." The first way that the light of the world works in our lives is to reveal our guilt. And there is something about our human nature that means we don't like that. We pull away from that. We like to think of ourselves as good people. And we feel pretty offended when people suggest otherwise. Or we react and we want to defend ourselves and justify. Or even if we're aware of our own issues and we're happy to and content to admit it to ourselves, we definitely don't want other people to. We want other people to think that we're good. But we need to understand that in the eyes of God, we are not good people. I am not a good person. And neither are you. We are sinful and we are guilty. We can feel good about ourselves when we compare ourselves with other people. But the light of the world, the light that God shines through his word, exposes that that's not enough. And when instead we allow the light to shine, the mess is exposed for what it really is. When we start to compare ourselves to God's standards, we quickly realize, at least I do, how far fall we short. That God looks not just at my actions, but at my heart. The stuff I can hide from everyone else, his light shines on and I can't hide from him. Those moments when I might not have kind of said anything, but I've been holding on to this kind of anger within my heart at what somebody's done. You know, at those times when, I've entertained lustful thoughts. Or when I might have not told an outright lie, but I've just kind of twisted the truth. It's still true, but it's a little bit twisted and warped to be said from my perspective, to kind of get the angle that I want, so that I end up looking better at the end of it. Simply the selfish drive within me for what I want, or the self-righteous drive within me that leads me to looking down on other people. My guilt is exposed in God's light. And it doesn't make for pleasant viewing. And it's not comfortable. God's light reveals our sin and our guilt. But while it might not be comfortable, it is so important. Because it's only when we realize our guilt, when we see our sin, that we understand our need of a Savior. And to be honest, I say, we might not like to face it, we might want to try and keep it hidden. The reality is that we can't hide it from Him anyway. That it's all exposed to Him anyway. He knows it all anyway, because He's the light of the world, and His light shines into every dark corner that we try and kind of hide things in. And when we do try and hide, it's exhausting. And it's confining, and it leaves us feeling trapped in this tiny corner of darkness in the room, rather than free to step out into the light. Do you know, it may be uncomfortable, but there is freedom that comes when the light of the world exposes our guilt. Because the good news is that he not only sees it, but as the light of the world, He wants to work in your life and in my life to set us free from it. To lead us from darkness to light, from slavery to freedom. And that's what we see happens next with the woman who has been exposed in her guilt. As the religious leaders, they try and trap Jesus, he kind of ignores the question. And we read this in verse 6. It says, instead of answering their question, Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with His finger. And you can imagine the religious leaders just be like, what is He doing? Is He crazy? Jesus, do we stone or do we not? And He just ignores them. He doesn't answer their question. Instead, He kneels down, starts writing in the dirt with His finger. And, to be honest, we don't know what He writes. But there's some evidence from kind of later kind of copies of John's Gospel that possibly he wrote down the sins, the things that these men were guilty of who were accusing the woman. And I think that's probably the most likely case with what he says next, and also with the word that's actually used here that we translate to write down actually means to write down a record against. And so as Jesus writes down this record against on the ground, this is what we read in verse 7. It says, when they kept on questioning Him, He straightened up and said to them, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And again, when it says without sin here, what it really means is without even wanting to sin. He's not just focusing on our outward behavior, on their outward behavior, but on the heart, on the inner thoughts of those people. He's saying, if you have never done anything wrong, in fact, if you've never even thought about doing anything wrong, you never wanted to do anything wrong, then you pick up the first stone and you throw it. And this is a powerful moment. Because how many of you know it's incredibly easy to see others' guilt? To see the wrong in others and to overlook our own. And in this moment, Jesus is highlighting that to the religious leaders. And then we read on in verse 8 where it says, and again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And in what had felt like a dark moment of shame, what had felt like the darkest moment of her life, when her guilt had been exposed, when she felt so vulnerable, she looks at Jesus and she says, "No one, sir." Then Jesus looked at this desperate woman and spoke the most grace-filled, love-filled words that allow the light to overcome the darkness, that cleansed her of her guilt. He said, "Then neither do I condemn you. Then neither do I condemn you." And this is the second way that I want you to understand that Jesus is the light of the world for you in a very real way. He is the light that overcomes the darkness. The light shines to cleanse you. Doesn't just expose, but he cleanses you from guilt and sets you free. And it might be that right now, today, you feel in darkness in some way. Maybe there's a shame or a pain from something that you did or that happened to you. It could have been years ago, something that you've lived with and maybe felt like you've lived under, something that you've maybe feel like has kept you trapped in that corner, hiding. Jesus wants you to know that he comes, not to expose you in this way that just leaves you feeling worse, but he comes as the light of the world to overcome the darkness in your life, the light of the world to cleanse you from guilt, the light of the world to bring you out of that place of feeling trapped and enslaved into freedom. He wants you to know that there is no condemnation for those who are in him. You are not what you did or what you failed at or what has been spoken over you. You are set free and you are washed clean and you are loved. There is an accuser that comes at us with thoughts that say otherwise, the voice of accusation that's going to come at you and against you to pull you down, to make you question that, to make you question your worth or your relationship with God, your hope for the future. That's the voice of the enemy. It's the voice of the prince of darkness. It's the voice of Satan, who in Revelation 12 is called the accuser. The voice of Jesus, the voice that we want to pay attention to, the voice that is the light of the world, the voice of your Savior. It's the one who shines into our lives and says, "Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." My light overcomes your guilt. It overcomes your accuser. It silences him. Because in me, there is no condemnation. And then I love what Jesus says next. He says simply, "Go now and leave your life of sin." He's saying, go now, not later. Don't put it off. Go now. You can be free now. You can live and enjoy this now. You don't have to live in darkness anymore. And as you come to Jesus today, I believe he's saying the same thing to some of you. You don't have to stay trapped in darkness. There's maybe been habits or things that you've battled with for years that you feel you're just trapped in, and he's saying, no, go now. Right now, you can be set free. Right now, step out of the darkness and into the light. You don't have to be locked in a dark world of lust or anger or whatever it might be. You don't have to stay in that place where the darkness seems to just pull at you incessantly. Right now, turn from darkness, step into light. I've got freedom for you. I believe some of you today, there have been things that have been hidden things in your life. a darkness that you've maybe grown comfortable with and you don't want to put the light on. But God is saying, I want to set you free. Because you see, the light of the world not only exposes our sin, not only overcomes the darkness in our lives, but the third thing that we see in these verses is the light of the world shows us the way to go. Light leads. And I think what Jesus says becomes so powerful when we put it all together, when we realize that these aren't two entirely separate, isolated events. Sometimes we tend to read the Bible and we read it in chunks and we miss how it all comes together. But when we see this, this encounter with a woman flows into what it is that he says. When we put it all together, he says, go now and leave your life of sin. You don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to live in darkness or shame. You can be different. You can be free. Go now and leave your life of sin. Why? Because I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And in this moment, Jesus was not just the light of the world. He was the light of her world. And today he wants you to know him not just as the light of the world, in this way where you know he's amazing, but it's all a little bit abstract. He wants you to know him as the light of your world. No matter how dark your world might seem right now, he is your light. He is your hope. He has forgiveness for you, and he wants to set you free from shame, and he wants you to know that you can have life in all its fullness, have the light of life as you follow him. You know, and to follow someone, that's an action, isn't it? It's not just about what we think and what we believe. You know, when we follow Jesus, it means he's our leader and not us. It means that we give up on the idea that we know best. And we surrender to him knowing that he does. It means that he doesn't just give us good advice that we kind of weigh up and decide what we're going to do with. He gives us our marching orders. And his promise is that as we follow him in this way, that we will never walk in darkness again. He's saying, if you follow me, if you trust in me, if you obey me, then I am the light of your world. I am with you, the power of God, the presence of God with you wherever you go to lead you out of slavery and into freedom, out of darkness and into light. And so I want to just make space for us to kind of allow God to shine his light, for us to respond to him in this way, and for allow him just to come and for us to ask him to make himself known to us, not just as the light of the world, but the light of our world, of my world, of your world. I guess the band to come up, and I want you to take this time just to be real with God. You know, come to Jesus and allow him to shine his light on things in your life. Use this as a time to say, Jesus, I don't want to have things hidden away anymore. I don't want to have corners of darkness that you know are there, but I try and pretend you don't. Shine your light and expose those things in me. And shine your light and cleanse. Wash me clean. Make me new. Overcome the darkness and set me free. And then shine your light and show me. Show me the way to go. Show me what it is to follow you in this area of my life. Show me how I can walk in the light and not end up being pulled back into darkness again. You know, God is not looking for perfect people. God is looking for honest people. And our relationship with him, your relationship with him, will only grow deeper to the extent that we are honest with him. And so we walk in the light. Don't let the enemy's accusations, your own feelings of shame hold you back and pull you away and make you kind of want to hide. And I want to encourage you today that there is no condemnation in Jesus. He doesn't expose you to make you feel bad. He exposes you to set you free. And it might be that you're feeling like the darkness in your life is just so overwhelming that how is this going to help? Can he start? What's going to happen? But I want to encourage you that the light shines brightest in the darkest places. That it only takes a little bit of light in a dark place to give an awful lot of hope. And as you have come to Jesus today, you are coming to the light of the world. And his presence and his power and his love and his hope is the bright light that you need. So we're just going to make some space. The band are going to lead us, and we're just going to make some space to respond to God, just to be honest with him, to invite him to shine his light in each one of our lives, whether we're here, whether you're at home. Just want to encourage us to open your heart to him right now. I'm going to pray. And just let's allow his Spirit to move. Jesus, we want to thank you that we can come to you today. And I want to thank you that you are for us. I want to thank you, Lord, that even in that most horrific moment for that woman, when she was exposed and humiliated and shamed, and she knew her guilt, and it was put out not just in front of you, but in front of everybody. I want to thank you for your grace and your love, the way that you showed that to her. And we want to thank you that it just gives us a wonderful example of how you want to work in our lives, that we don't have to pull back from the light, but we can come to you, knowing that as we do, we receive grace and mercy and love, that you don't condemn us, but you wash us clean, you make us new. Lord, I pray that in this time you would shine your light. Lord, I pray that in this time there would be a time where there have been maybe areas of darkness that we've even forgotten about, that are just hidden away, that we've not even realized that you would just shine your light on them right now in each one of our hearts. Lord, that we would not be even unconsciously living in a dark place, but you would set us free that we might live in the fullness of the light of your life, that we might walk with you, be honest and real with you. So I pray you come and touch each person here, that as we are real and honest, you would set people free, you would bring people hope, you would show people the way to go and the next steps that you have for them, Lord, that we would leave this place encouraged in you and with a sense of clarity as to where you're leading us. That we might honor you with our lives, that we might go now from this place, leave a life of sin and follow you as our light. Come and move amongst us by your Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.